Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the best practices for handling multi-estimate policies. Today, we're going to be covering the in and outs for handling these special types of claims. All right, now we're going to jump into the agenda. First, we're going to talk about the purpose of multi-estimates. Then we're going to go into the components of it. Then we're going to talk about obtaining the damage information. From there, we're going to talk about understanding prior loss information. Then we're going to go into making contact with the insurer. Then we're going to give you some tips on inspecting multiple buildings. And then from there, we're actually going to create one of these estimates in Simsol. Now we're about to get started. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A feature that I just showed you. We will address all questions at the end, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and type it into the Q&A. All right, now I'm going to go ahead hand it over to Danny. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Wonderful. All right, Danny, take it away.
Thank you so much. Well, good evening, everybody. What we're going to be talking about is the purpose of the multi-part estimates. And what this does is that we had a lot of requests from our carriers that they do numerous different master policies. And in this day and age, and you want to accommodate for the numerous types of policies to be included in one insurance policy, like a master policy, along with the individual policy limits and deductibles being applied. It's important to properly set up your estimate correctly and account for the individual policy limits, like I said, for each building, along with their associated deductibles. Simsol can, accomplish this task with ease and to present your estimate in an easy and a logical format for the insureds to comprehend and settle the claim. Each building estimate must be totaled up not to exceed the building's policy limit listed on the declaration page, along with the deductible being applied. So how is that done? Well, first of all, we're going to create the estimates, which you'll be seeing. But the big thing is after the estimates are created, we're going to use the Simsol statement of loss, which completes the task by adding everything up and accounts for all the totals for each building, including the recoverable and non-recoverable depreciation, and also any advances. So what are the benefits of multi-estimates in Simsol? Well, you can create unlimited estimates within the Simsol system. Before, in the original version of Simsol, you could only create 3. That was going to be the building, the APS, the pertinent private structures, as well as the contents, which is personal property, and the last would be an ALE estimate, which is one ALE estimate. That's the only thing you could create. Now we can create unlimited building, APS, as well as contents. So what's the next thing we can do? We can assign the policy limits with the deductible for each estimate. That's a big thing. So we do that with ease, and the statement of loss will take care of that for us. It's good for farm and ranch policies. That's just the name that they've given for multi-part estimates. Sometimes it's referred to as an umbrella policy or a master policy. It will also use within commercial claims as well. So we have a lot of umbrella type policies dealing with commercial losses. And lastly, it produces the accurate statement of loss for all the buildings. I do want to put an important notice in. Multiple part estimates are not intended for a flood claim, okay, or any other forms that use the flood forms, okay? The statement of loss is the only reporting or total type of form that it can do. It cannot produce a proof. It cannot produce a final report that's mandatory in flood. This is mainly for homeowners and commercial policies. Moving on. So what are the components of a multi-part estimate? Okay. Well, the adjusters must obtain the first notice of loss, which we call the FNOL, to determine how many buildings are assigned to the policy, along with each policy limit with the deductible. A prime example of this is like a farm and ranch policy, which consists of the main insured's residence, okay, that's the main building, along with the APS, which is a pertinent private structure. Then the additional multi-part estimate is mainly what you want to add on to it for different buildings that are around that's not part of the pertinent private structures. For example, barn 1, barn 2, barn 3, barn 4, or any other building. Okay. The adjuster must check the policy to determine if the detached garage has its own limit with the deductible, or is it part of the main risk, which would normally be 10% of the policy limit of the insured's main risk. If the detached garage is considered part of the main building, then we're going to use the APS estimate, which is automatically taking that 10%. Estimate is in writing for all the estimates, and all the buildings such as barn 1, 2, and 3, for example, will have its own building estimate and the associated limits with deductible if applicable. Okay. So the next thing that we've wanted to do is, so we've obtained the first notice of loss. We determine how many buildings in their policy limits. We need to determine if each building qualifies for full replacement costs, and that's really important because most of the time when you're dealing with a commercial loss, it's all ACV. But if you're dealing with a building or agricultural type of loss with the buildings, they might be full replacement costs. So you need to look at the policy itself and determine if that meets that qualification. Just as important to look at the FNOL and determine these policies and the buildings, we need to also check the exclusions for specifically listed on the first notice of loss, because what can you pay for it within that building that you would normally pay for in another building? Yes. So you need to check that. Okay. And another thing is commercial losses may have multiple buildings, like I said before, to one policy with its own policy limit, deductibles being applied to each individual buildings or group of buildings. Okay. All right, here's an example of an FNOL. Okay, so as you can see, we have changed the names to protect the innocent here, but you can see that we have on our first one, we have $45,000 with a $500 deductible. Second building might be $75,000 with $500. Extended coverage structures, $10,000 and $500, and it goes on and on, as you can see. Now, usually your main building will have, like, for example, in my example, we're going to use $250,000, probably with a $1,000 deductible. And then on the APS side, it'll take 10% of that, which will be $25,000. And the deductible is inclusive with the main building. So those are the things that you need to be aware of. Just as I said, examples of exclusions. Here's a typical FNOL for the exclusions for all the different buildings, things that you need to check. All right, what we need to do now is obtain the damage information. And what this does is actually obtaining much part of the information to the inspection. And tips that you want to use is review the prior loss property, noting what buildings were damaged and not damaged. It's just as important to document what's not damaged than it is as well as it is to damage. Okay, because that reveals a lot of good information. Review the claim notes and the reports from the prior loss from the adjuster. So if you had a different adjuster on it, then you need to look at his report and look at his notes and what the mechanism of damage is. Okay. It's important to review what happened in the prior history and determine what the property is prone to, or what was the mechanism of loss. Did the insured repair all the prior loss damage leading up to the loss? Okay. So we need to check that. If the repairs were fixed, we need to obtain all the prior repairs and receipts from that. Make a printout of all the prior losses and categorize them for each building. And then what you want to do is take that with you when you're conducting your inspection. Another thing is check check your weather reports if damaged, if it was weather related. Like, for example, there might be a hail report, tornado report provided by local and state government, as you can see. Weather reporting from Service TV is a really good source on that. And then I always check with the local and state evacuation orders or closures. This gives you a good idea what the damage could be when you arrive on your inspection. Okay, so these are just some preliminary steps. So the next thing that we're going to be moving on. And this is like understanding, we've gone a little bit on this, understanding prior loss information. One thing I would like to show you is review the claim notes, as we said, but what is the property prone to? What is the mechanism of loss? Did the insured paid off the prior loss? We've gone through those steps, but it's just a good recap, okay? Make your printout of all the prior losses categorized by building as stated. We're going to move on to the next slide. That brings us up to making contact with the insured, okay? First contact is very important, and what it does is it sets the pace of the claim and gains the insured's trust so that the adjuster can attempt to settle this loss very easily. Prompt contact reinsures with the insured that their claim is being handled in a normal professional manner. Contact should be made within 24 hours. This is nothing new. We all have our other rules that we all use, but usually the general rule is within 24 hours of receipt of assignment. Sometimes you can't do that because telephones are down, computers are down, emails are down. So sometimes you just might have to go out at the loss and leave a drop card. All calls received by the adjuster should always be promptly returned unless you're on the inspection. Good rule for me is I always turn my phone off when I'm doing my inspections. I try to devote 100% of my time to that insured. Okay. Well, I always ask the insured, what happened? When did it happen? And what was damaged associated to each building? And then the adjuster can plan his inspection on the property accordingly. Okay. The adjuster can inform the insured to have all the receipts, all related documentation for any of the prior losses. And we want to set a realistic time for inspection. So also try to set the inspection early enough. Usually a good tip is in the morning for the insured's convenience. And try not to schedule loss during twilight hours because you don't want to be adjusting in the dark. And allow for traffic delays as well, okay? All right, and that brings us up to inspecting multiple buildings. Where do you start, okay? I always start with the main building. I don't care if the insurer is stating that there's no damage to that building. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to be looking for different indications of the loss. If it was a hailstorm, it'd be on the roof, checking on that, checking the exterior siding, things of that nature. The adjuster is a trained professional, okay, and he can see damage that maybe the insured did not. The insured is mainly looking for the most damage he can find, and that's what he needs to have fixed. As before, I told you it's just as important to document no damage along with items that are damaged. Another thing that I like to do is pictures are worth 1,000 words. So please take a lot of pictures. In this day of digital, you can just snap away and it's not going to be a big impact on the claim. And you can always then filter those photos out when you're assembling the claim. The adjuster should have the policy in hand during the inspection along with the deck page. So that way he knows what the exclusions are and what the limits are. That gives him a good part of what's going on with that claim. And as before, we talked about check for indications of a prior loss. If a prior loss was detected, determine if the repairs were completed by the insured. So if they were, we need the receipts. Inspect all the buildings on the property, even if the insured reports no damage, like I said before. So If I didn't have damage to barn 3 that we're going to be doing, I'm still going to be in there looking and taking all the pictures. I want to document that, saying that there's no damage. So if he comes back, if the insured says, well, I found additional damage, then I'll go out there. But if I have a picture that's at the same angle in the same area, then I know that it wasn't performed by that for that day of loss. Another thing that I like to do is make sure your scope notes and photos are in line or in sequence with the building currently inspected. So that way that you have everything that you need for that building all in one area. Okay, so when you take your pictures, make it sequential. Always start from one side of the building and work your all the way around and then end up at that same starting position. Here's some examples of actually some damaged farm and ranch type policies. On the left that you see here, this is a very large storage facility along with a silo down there for grain. As you can see, there's some siding, metal siding that's over there on the top, right on the exterior siding there. As you can see by that front door over there, and then on the side. So that gives me an indication that we've had maybe some type of wind-related activity. The slide over there on your right-hand side is, I can see that those nails have been popped up by the wind. So we definitely had some type of wind action going there. Here's another thing of another barn, barn 2. There we have our door that's in the front there. Now take a look at that. That looks like it's pre-existing damage. So you need to look at that and then take a look at the sides. You know, we definitely have some type of wind indication, but not to say that that door has not been hit prior, or it might be from a prior loss. On your photo on your right, you can see that they're missing panels, okay, from that wind event. Silos that you see right there, the grain silos that you see, are not really normally damaged, but usually where I find damage is actually in the plumbing that's hooking them up. That usually blows away. And also, if this is a wind event, please check your foundation items that's anchored in the concrete. Make sure that those bolts are secured and they're not loose, or that you don't see any larger holes ripping out from the wind. Just a thought. Here we on barn number 2. If you look on your right-hand side, you're going to see that you're missing all kinds of metal siding there. So when creating multiple estimates in Simsol, you know, we need to define the coverages, and that's what we're going to be doing, and name each coverage that you're referencing. Create all the estimates in the claim, name each estimate for your reference, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Apply the correct coverages for each estimate. Adjust the estimate settings as needed. That goes without saying. Enter the line items and damages, which will be showing you that. But we also need to create an insured to valuation I to Vs, and this is important for each individual building, because we might have different limits. I mean, different statutes that says we need to have an I to V insured to value within 80%, or it's full replacement cost, or it's ACV. So to make that determination, we have to have the valuation on each building. We're also going to do, like I said before, generate the statement of loss, and then we're going to label the claim photos, and then we're going to finalize it with printing it. So let's jump to Simsol and see how it's done. Okay, so I'm going to come up here, and then we're going to go right into our Simsol system. All right, you should be able to see my system right here. So we are on a farm and ranch policy, as you can see. And what we're going to be doing here is the first step that we normally need to do is click on coverages, because we have to define the coverage. When you created the claim, it's going to create automatically coverage A through D. Coverages A through D is standardized, so you won't have to put that in. The wizard will do that for you. As I said before, coverage A is $250,000 main building with a $1,000 deductible. Coverage B is known as a pertinent private structure, and that's subject to a 10%. And you can see that right here. Off from there, and I'm going to change that to 25,000. So if you do have something that you need to edit, that's how you would do it. Then we have our contents, which we have a $150,000 limit, and our deductible, our deductibles shared by coverage A. Remember, coverage D is your ALE. So if you have additional living expense, let's say they were displaced from the main building, then you'll need to address that. So this is where the fun begins. Here we have barn 1 through barn 4, which is right here. And so that'll be coverage E to coverage H, okay? So how we do that's real simple. To create that, we want to use the additional coverages only. Do not use the standard coverage. It will not work. Always use additional coverages, okay? So if you pass the ALE and you're doing the additional buildings, additional coverage. I'm going to create one just to show you on the fly, and then we'll use the delete coverage to do that, to remove it, sorry. So we're going to click on additional coverage, then you can actually name this, let's say, barn 5, in which I can do that. On the coverage item, I can say barn 5, and I can then put my limit in. Let's say it's $5,000. And the deductible is $1,000. So it's pretty steep on that one. I also can set the reserves on that, okay? And that's how easy it is. So each coverage that you do after you fill the screen out, you're going to go to the next one, you're going to click additional coverages. If I make a mistake, I can come up here and say, here I have coverage H, which is right here. But from that, I'm going to say coverage H, barn 4. And I try to do that so I can, when I'm looking at the estimate, it's already defined as such. Okay? So if I need to delete one, there's my coverage 5. I can then hit the delete coverage, and it gives you that opportunity. So once these have been defined from the FNOL, what I'm doing is going to click on Done. Now I've got the first part done. Now I'm going to create those buildings. Remember that my main building, which is right up here, the first one, and if you take a look when you first do it, you're only going to have one building, one APS, and one contents. So this is my main building that I have, okay? And as you can see, it's for placement cost coverage, and because I have it at force qualified, that's what the policy stated, and it's tied to the coverage. Now, I'm going to create, I've got barn 1 already done, barn 2, and these are already been filled out, and there's estimates associated to these. I now want to show you how to create an additional estimate. Remember that I told you that we can have unlimited estimates. To do this task, all we need to do is go to the building estimate. It's going to be the house with the blue roof. So as I select that, make sure it's in blue, I'm going to use my right-click button, and select additional estimate. From that, then I can name this. So I can come over here and say that this is going to be barn 5 estimate. Then put the data loss in. Now, the reason why I do not have use coverage information selected is because I deleted that barn 5, if you remember. So just be aware I brought this up on purpose so that you could see if you run out of your coverages, then this will be grayed out. So to fix this, I will come up to my loss information, come up to cover, click on additional coverages, and then I'm going to say coverage I, and I'm going to say barn 5. And select this as barn 5. And remember, we had it a $5,000 deductible with a limit of 5,000 with a deductible of 1,000. This must be like a little shed. So as I do this, select it. Now when I come back to my barn 5 estimate, I should have my use coverage information. It's not grayed out. I can select it, hit the down arrow, and then select barn 5 as you can see it. Now it will now tie all the figures that I write for barn 5 will go into the statement of loss, which you will see in just a few minutes. Remember, the next thing after you tie the coverage in, this is the most important thing. When you make an additional estimate up, you have it assigned in your coverages, and you created it, you must tie the coverage in, and that's basically what we did here. That activates the coverage for the statement of loss. And it's not just an estimate, it's now a claim. So the next thing that I need to address, is this going to be an insured to value, which needs to be 80% insured to value, or is it going to be full replacement cost? If it is, I can check both of these for full replacement costs and move on. If it's an ACV policy only, make sure these are unchecked, okay? So that's an ACV policy that you see right there. You can always put whatever estimate and cover page notes to describe that building if need be. So once we have that in, then you can start from all your buildings. You do that same procedure for all the buildings you would like to add. So let's take a look. Once you've added, this is my main building that you saw, and this would be which was damaged by a tornado. Okay, so I've got a premier exterior walls. You just write the estimate as you always would for the main building. Then you're going to jump down to, I always jump down to the appurtenant private structures next. But then as you see here, it's already been defined. Remember, the wizard took care of that for us. And then here's our garage plus roof. So we have an estimate based on that. We write the estimate. If you're using Area Logics or GeoEstimator for the roof, that's makes it a breeze, because then you can just come up and hit roof third-party import and then bring that in and then run the items associated to that roof. Once that's completed, then I like to go into what we just added. In this case, barn 1, come up here to the scope of damage, then we only had damage to the roof. So you go into and create the areas for the damaged items. In this case, the roof, along with all the different line items. And it keeps track of the limit as well as the deductible. It also tracks recoverable and non-recoverable depreciation for that type of estimate. And it makes it nice and easy. So as you can see, here's my different line items that I have. Barn 2, I do the same thing. Now, I really want to make sure this was already been predefined, though, that when I go into the scope of damage, before I go into it, I really like to check to make sure my use coverage information is selected, so the building is correctly selected for the type of coverage that I'm doing. In this case, barn 2 is going to be associated with barn 2 estimate. Also address, just to recap here, address if it's full replacement cost. If it's insured to value at 80%, then it qualifies for full replacement cost, or if it's ACV. Here I have barn 3, no damage. And what I usually do here is I'll put barn 3, and if I think there's no damage because I'm not presenting an estimate, I'll put no damage in. Barn 4, I selected, then I've got my roof, and then we have our barn 5, in which I would have to write that scope. Okay, so to save time, we're going to be moving on, and we're going to go to our contents estimate here, which is automatically generated by the wizard, the claims wizard. But what I like to do before you start this contents inventory, okay, we need to check something here. I go to the contents inventory information window, make sure it's tied, and then put the inventory valuation. This is for personal property. It is not part of the I to V that is associated to the building. So you're going to put the RCV in, followed by the ACV. And it's really important that you define the sales tax prior to your first line item. So make sure that sales tax is set at 8% or whatever it is prior to that. Okay, make sure your notes are all in, and you'll write your contents estimate. Okay, the next thing that we need to address, remember when we were talking about, is we need to make sure that we have the right valuation. As you can see, I can create unlimited estimates, but I also can create unlimited square foot valuations as well. So I have barns 1, 2, and 4 that are damaged already. I've already done them. So to create an evaluation, it's real simple. We're going to come up and select square foot valuation. I'm going to right click using my mouse and then select new. And then once I do that, then I can come up and give it a name on the I to V name, barn 5. And then from that, make sure I have a zip code in order to get the price. If you don't have a zip, you have no price. So as you can go, you can come back. I like to go to agricultural, and we can come up and say that this is a barn hay storage. As you select it, then I can pick the amount of square footage for that building. Let's say it's 1,000. And then it automatically places it in. If it's on slab on grade, put that all in. Make sure that I have the year built. And it will automatically put in the value on that. So let's say it's 18 years. So I'm placing that in there. It will recalc for me. And I just come up and click next. Remember that I'm going to put in all the appropriate components, and I'm just going to keep on moving down the line until we get to the building value. So as you can see, there it is. That's why that building was valued at 5,000. It's only 9,000 of actual cash value at this juncture. So what I need to do, and what you need to do for all the estimates that you have added, we need to tie the square foot valuation to the various different buildings. So let me show you how to do that. From the building estimate, that's the gold padlock. This is my main estimate here. You can see building info. And then from that, you can see that I've already defined it. See, I can select it. So I've already got it selected. I'm going to do that same operation for barn 1, barn 2, all the way to the 5th one. So as you can see, I can then select this. Make sure it's all filled out. Remember, use your drop downs to tie it into the actual estimate. You need to hit the selection drop down, and then you can pick the evaluation associated to that building. And you do that for all of them. So the ones I didn't have would be this barn 5. So I can come up here like this, select it, and then come up and then bring this over. I'm sorry. So that you can see that when we do this, we can then come up, select residential or agricultural. In this case, it's barn 5, type of foundation, concrete slab, type of roof. We're going to say that it could be a shingle or metal. Exterior wall construction, we can use a wood frame or metal frame. And then wood studs, and if it's on the interior walls, 1 level, how many rooms, 0 baths, so you can see that this is putting it in. And then I'm putting in the age. To tie it, this is very important. We're going to come up and select the down arrow, and then you see the barn 5, it automatically will populate that. And I'm going to then select done. So we have that all defined. We have the estimates written. We have the I to V's tied. The last step that we need to do, which is the most important step, is actually creating the statement of loss. So let me show you how we're going to do this. We're going to come up to loss information, and we're going to click on the SOL button. That's called the statement of loss. As I select that, I'm going to pull this over, which is right here. And all these tabs represent of all the buildings that you've created. So if you have barn 5, which I created off the fly here, is going to be right over here on the last one. Detach APS, it would be barn 5, which is right here. So you can see that. I'm going to start, there's 2 arrows over here, one for left, one for right, to go through the menus. So each screen that you see right here is going to be that building associated to that building. So in this case, I'm going to click Cover J. I already have it pretty much filled out. But if you make any change, I'm going to repeat this again. If you make any change, what you need to do is go back to that coverage, click Copy All. That will update the system. It's not an auto update. So you need to come by and if you make any change within that building, always come back to that building, hit Copy All. And as you can see, you can also address your coverages. It also tracks the recoverable and non-recoverable items as well. So you're going to do that for all your building items, APS, personal property, and ALE. So usually what I do is I start over here from the left, work over to the right, and I just come over here and click Copy All for each one. Make sure that I address any of the advances. As you can see, there's my barn 4. Here I'm coming up to barn 5, as you can see. Hit Copy All. It will then track that. I didn't have any estimate line items in there, but I did have the evaluation. Make sure your APS is done and contents. And the last one is going to be your coverage D ALE. So it will actually do that for you. Any advances off that ALE will be done. And the last step is to do the SOL recap. So as I click on the SOL recap, there it is. That adds everything up seamlessly. It tracks recoverable, non-recoverable, and also all the advances. Last step that we're going to be doing is showing you how to print it. So I'm going to go to the global print screen. From the global print screen, first thing I'm going to do is pick the statement of loss. And then from that, I'm going to come up and then select my building estimates. So what I like to do is do my building APS, then all my additional estimates that I've added. Now, I like to print the one that says no damage because the examiner sees that. But that's not really that necessary. Come up to my contents, select it, and then my ALE then. From that, then I can then select my photos. I have a lot of photos in here, so it takes a second for it to read that. So once it comes up, then I select the photos that I'd like to assign. I'm only going to do a couple pictures here. And then the last step is come up and printing it. Now you do have the ability to print to your printer, print to the screen, or print to a PDF. So this is not changed. It's just going to have more buildings. So as I do this and select preview, it automatically will generate your pages for you. So as that's rendering, you can see that you can do multiple buildings. Here we have a sample. There's our statement of loss. As you can see, it breaks it down by the coverages and what that item is, your APS, ALE, UPP, the grand summary that you saw there, and then it goes right into your estimates for each building. And that's how it's presented. So I'm just cursoring down. And then from that, I like to use the estimate summary details. This is a grouping function. You can see how it breaks out from building 1 main risk, and then it does all on that one, it has the exteriors. But basically, here's my roofing for the second building. So it's a pretty detailed estimate on here. Here's my personal property, as you saw. And so it gets, and then ending up, I'm going a little bit quick here. But if we want to going to the photos will be next, as you can see. Okay, so with that, that's how we create multi-part estimates. I hope this has been enjoyable for you, and we're open up for any questions, Nicole.
So again, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to attend our webinar. Just to say it again, we are going to be following up with a link to the recording as well as